Hey, what's going on with shipping? Sal Mercogliano coming to you from the beautiful campus of Campbell University, perched up high on the banks of the Cape Fear River in North Carolina. So a lot of commentary, a lot of issues coming out regarding the origin and the involvement of electrical vehicles on board the Fremantle Highway. So a quick update on that story. Number one, the ship is moored in Eemshaven. I believe I got that right finally. I had a lot of comments from my Dutch viewers that I've been pronouncing Eemshaven incorrectly, so I just listened to a pronunciation on it. The vessel is moored in Eemshaven, and what has triggered this controversy was a statement from the CEO of Smit Boskalis, which is the salvage firm which has been hired to oversee the salvage of the vessel. Peter Brodasky came on Bloomberg and discussed the fact that the fire's point of origin was probably around deck 8. Now, the car carrier Fremantle Highway is a big, kind of massive, imagine a car parking deck. And the bottom deck would be deck 1, the top one would be deck 12. Deck 8 is about a third away from the top. Now, it's hard to identify the exact point of origin because the decks are so damaged. He talked about the fact that they were fused together and some decks have collapsed. But he believes it started right around deck 8. The fire spread laterally across the vessel because there's no fire breaks on this vessel. It's a long 600-foot open deck. The fire ran across those decks and then radiated both up and downward. Now, fires don't usually radiate downward, but they do on ships because of the steel construction. The top of the steel decks turn into like broilers to the deck below, and you self-ignite vehicles. And everything above deck 5 has been pretty well cooked on this vessel. Matter of fact, there were some photos released that got out, which weren't supposed to get out. The salvage company and K-Line, the owner of the company, have done everything they can to keep this quiet, including erecting a container barrier around the vessel in Eemshaven. What Peter said in his interview has been interpreted to mean a couple of things. So a lot of people are taking what Peter said and said no EVs were involved in the fire. What Peter actually said was this: the vehicles that are stored on decks 1 through 4 are intact. And this is largely because deck 5, which is in the upper third, or lower third part of the vessel, but that's the deck the stern ramp is connected to. That deck was empty, which makes sense. When you come up the stern ramp of a vessel, you're either going to go down or up. And when you load vessels like car carriers like the Fremantle Highway, you load the bottom decks first, and then you drive all the way to the top deck. And you leave the middle deck, especially deck 5, which is the entrance deck, empty. And in this case, the vessel was not fully loaded. This vessel could carry about 6,000 vehicles, and it had a little under 4,000. So there was a natural fire break. The fire proceeded from deck 8 upward and then downward, and then when it hit a void space, it did not go any further. So the vehicles that are on deck 1 through 4 are undamaged. What Peter has said and has been interpreted to say is this: that about 1,000 vehicles are on decks 1 through 4, and half of them are EVs. We know now that there are less than 500 EVs on the vessel, so everybody did a quick math calculation and sat there and said, well, 1,000 vehicles on decks 1 through 4, half of them are EVs, that's less than 500, therefore all the EVs were below deck 1 and 4, and therefore they were not involved in the fire. However, Splash 24/7 just came out with a story and says the exact number, or the actual number, is around 800 vehicles. And if you go by half of that, that's under 400, which means we're not sure if there are EVs involved in this fire or not. And I think it's really important to say that. Now, we could know. The ship, K-Line, and the car manufacturers could tell us what the manifest and inventory is. They just won't. And that's the problem. So I understand everybody wants to take an opinion on EVs. I get that. My opinion on EVs is very clear. I don't have an opinion on EVs. My opinion on EVs regards their loading on car carriers. And what I will say is this: whether or not a fire starts an EV or not doesn't matter. But on a car carrier, if an EV gets involved in a fire, whether it started it or it jumps from an internal combustion engine car alongside, it is a massive danger for the crew and the vessel. Because EVs burn hotter and longer, and we know this, this is where the danger comes from. And it's very important to identify that and understand that. We don't know if EVs were involved in this fire or not. What we do know is that a good number of the EVs were on the lower decks and they were not involved. Now, had they become involved, this would have been a different fire, and I'm not exactly sure you salvage this vessel if the entire vessel was involved, whether it was EVs or internal combustion engines. But what we do know is that the ship's crew was unable to extinguish this fire They used their fixed firefighting systems. They did not get an extinguishment of the fire. We know EVs will not go out in CO2 and foam. We do know that the crew had to abandon ship. They had to abandon ship, not even using their own lifeboats because this fire got out of control so quickly. The 2 lifeboats are still in their mooring cradles. Some people have commented, well, they should have had free-falling lifeboats. You have never been in a free-falling lifeboat if you said that, because they are dangerous as anything. More mariners die in lifeboats than in almost anything else. They are extremely dangerous, and free-falling lifeboats in particular are really dangerous. The problem here is that crews had to jump, and therefore we just don't know. And that is what we know so far in the story. Smith-Bacalus, K-Line can disseminate that information. They just haven't yet. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, and if you can, support the page. How do you do that? Hit the super thanks button so you can contribute to the page, or head on over to Patreon. Sal, signing off from beautiful Campbell University alongside old J.A. Campbell back here.